So, hey, good evening. Welcome to another edition of free training from Traditions Training and all the instructors who I'll introduce here shortly. This is a kind of a follow-up program that we wanted to do. We did a hump day hangout with Bobby Halden the first of the month, and we did feel like we didn't get to a lot of the stuff that we wanted to get to in that quick hour. So we wanted to make sure that we kind of put it back out, and I want to get all of our instructors on board, and each with their different disciplines, to talk about, how they respond, how they operate, their challenges that they have at these garden apartment fires. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about this evening. We're going to have one of our instructors tonight, Josh Burchick, is going to talk about Engine Company. Good evening, Josh. How are you tonight?
Hey, evening. Great seeing everybody. Appreciate the opportunity.
Hey, no problem. Looking pretty studious with those glasses on.
Yeah, fresh look.
Fresh look.
Getting old.
Our truck company guy tonight is going to be Doug Mitchell while we wait for Scott Kraut to come on. Doug, you want to show your sporty new hat?
How do I look?
Oh, you look good with the Christmas tree in the background. That's for sure.
Very nice. Merry Christmas, everybody.
What's in the cup in the background is probably what we're more concerned about. So,
it's just a cup of coffee. Keep me motivated for tonight.
All right. We got Sammy Hiddle from Wichita that's going to talk about the rescue company stuff. Sammy, how are you doing tonight?
Very good.
Thanks for elaborating, Sam.
Yes, really in depth.
And we got our two incident commanders for the night to talk about is Larry Schultz and Dan Shaw. Larry, how are we doing tonight?
All good, buddy. It's good to hang out with the fellas.
Dan, how are things in beautiful Fairfax or you're in Baltimore County this evening?
I am. Clearly, I'm doing better than Sammy, so I've said more words.
And Baltimore County's been going to a lot of fires here in the last couple of days, so.
They have.
So we're going to kind of get started. We got a lot to cover as each one of these gentlemen talk about their disciplines and the stuff that they do as the engine company, the truck company, the rescue, and the incident commander. So I'm going to give each of them about 15 or 20 minutes to talk about that. Not a whole lot of stuff you're going to see in slides or anything, just kind of a earmark of where we're at in the program. But these next couple slides is we're going to kind of just show you the kind of buildings that we're kind of talking about. We talk about these garden apartment buildings and the age of them. Here's your typical 1950s, the nice brick, common cock lofts, standard set of apartments on each floor. But once again, we have to have a plan for each one of these buildings that we go to. So this was the original type building. In the 1970s, we really started to expand that. Really a lot more of the garden came into play, where these buildings really weren't accessible for our ladder trucks, and it required long hose lines. And I'm sure, Josh will talk about some of that tonight, and as will Doug and Scott when he gets on. And then this is a really popular design now. Obviously, see a lot of these, especially in the areas that we go to in Pennsylvania, a lot of them in the Washington metropolitan area, all over the country, I'm sure, the type building. But this is kind of the newer type buildings that started in the early 2000s. I just learned this name Donut when I first got back to Prince George's County. But, where we kind of build a garden center or a parking garage, and then we build this huge building around it that 90% of the time is all wood. I mean, Dan and the crew in Fairfax burned down one of these that lasted, I think, 2 or 3 days. It was just a conflagration. And obviously, if you look at YouTube or watch the internet or anything like that, you'll see that these have been burning all across the country. So a lot of these buildings, and it's not specific to the Washington metropolitan area or anything like that. So, but just to give you some kind of idea of the buildings we're going to talk about, and if you have any questions about those buildings as each person talks about their discipline, then please send us something in the questions or in the chat room, and we'll be monitoring that. So what we're going to start off with is with the engine company stuff, and we're going to talk to our engine company lieutenant, Josh Burchick. And Josh, take it away. Look, Dan might try to hijack this because he really likes engine stuff, even though he's a chief now. So if you have to fend him off, let me know, and I'll cut him off. So.
Oh, man, anytime Dan Shaw has something to say, I'm going to sit back. But, yeah, I'm going to take the first 2 to 5 minutes of like an incident scene pulling up to this thing, and I'm just going to expand on it. So, right out the gate, we could already see in some of the pictures how we're dealing potentially with some tight streets. So as soon as we get on there, I'm going to, we got to leave room for the truck, right? So once we get room for the truck, maybe even 2 trucks, I'm going to pull all the way past the structure and find one of the ends. If I can't duck right into one of the parking spots, if I'm just completely wide open, I'm not going to mess with the scrub area. Awesome. But otherwise, I'm either going to park on the far side of the street and let them come up alongside of me, or I'm just going to get way the heck out of there. And if that means I need to pull longer lines or extend lines, I'm totally good with that. Our company should be training enough to where we can extend these lines quickly, or we've already had it pre-planned. We know exactly which line to pull. So we're just getting way the hell out of the way while still securing our own water, or make that plan for the water, communicate that. Now, as soon as that parking brake hits, my guys and gals are off. So that line deployment, one of the key things I see with issues with garden apartments is visualizing that line deployment. Part of our training when we go to our complexes out in the first due is we just get off and we just start visualizing and estimating these stretches. And it is super common that we run these boxes and we're pulling lines and we have tons and tons and tons of extra line in place. And that can be just as detrimental as having not enough line. So visualizing that deployment, and oftentimes, especially if they're lower floor fires, the shorter tack lines work absolutely beautifully. So anything from a 150 upwards to 250, whatever that short pre-connect is for your company, oftentimes those things work just as well. But I think people visualize that, hey, this is a bigger structure. We're parking a little bit further away. I got lots of cars. I got stairwells. They start thinking maybe more high-rise mentality, and they let that get to them. And so they're starting to pull 300s, 400s, and a lot of times it's not necessary. So visualizing correctly what that stretch is going to be and pulling those shorter lines a lot of times is going to save you a lot of time on that back end. And then once you actually get into the stairwells, because we have these common stairwells, which I'll expand on here in a minute, can you use those closed stairwells to your advantage? If you do have all this extra line, can you push a charge loop, up one of the sidewalls? Can you take it out the back? And actually, I'll get into the stairwells here now. So I'm pulling on scene, lines are coming off. What am I doing for a 360? These stairwells for these garden apartments are going to dictate a lot of what's going on. So just in my first due alone, never mind the entire county that I work in, we could have stairwells that are closed or completely wide open. They could just have one access from side alpha front, in and out. You could have access on the backside, so you got 2 access points through and through. You could have staircases on both sides of the through and through, or just a single one. They could be straight run steps, or they could be half levels where side alpha is one floor. You go half a set of steps, the backside is another half level. So you have all these half level runs of stairs that are just creating more turns and more turns for these hose lines to have to go through, for the companies to have to negotiate. So as far as the 360 concerned, I'm fortunate I went to the truck company that largely is going to take care of that for me. But if I'm in a more rural area, or if I'm the person who's just kind of by myself and I got to knock it out, not having a 360, that's definitely a contributing factor to a lot of Maydays. So we need to figure out what that backside is doing. So can I run straight through that stairwell, or am I going to have to run all the way around a complex? Can I run through in a neighboring apartment, into an adjacent apartment, take a look out their balcony and see what's going on? So I had to get creative with a 360 if I'm the one that definitely has to do it, but I got to figure out what's going on for that backside. Obviously with the closed stairwell, it's going to concentrate more smoke, but I'm going to have more issues for the citizens, but it kind of protects me if you're worried about wind driven type stuff, sitting up on the hill. Those open stairwells, it's just, you can have stuff humming through there, but it's going to get things opened up a little bit more. So is that a concern for what we got going on? So we got lines off, we positioned well. I'm figuring out how the stairwell is going to hurt or help me with what I'm doing for line deployment. But then the most obvious thing is confirm the fire location and extent. So this may not be a popular idea, but is the fire on the first floor and is it on the backside? I've had a handful where yeah, I'm pulling in. I have a straight shot to the backside. It's the first floor fire, and I've got fire ripping out the backside. And our general orders are going to tell us to drive past it, go to the front side, go through that side out the stairwell, and attack it from that side. So I'm going to open up the door and just mess up the entire stairwell. If fire is truly showing, and I don't have to worry about controlling anything, we've had a lot of luck of, hey, I've got water source. I'm going to communicate clearly that I'm going to deviate from the general order, and we're going to set up shop on the backside and hit this thing head on. Now, again, that's first floor fire. That's helped us in the past. We've had rocking fires where metal door and a metal frame, there's so much heat in there, it's actually kind of welded the door shut. So even if we did pass the fire, go all the way to side alpha and come back in and down, it would have taken us a hell of a time just to get into that door to get into the apartment. So now we can knock it down from side Charlie, and we can keep that stairwell clear for anybody that's trying to get in other units. But again, we just have to communicate that. Now, obviously, the most typical is it an upper floor fire for the engine companies? How many turns am I going to have to get around? We talked about the stairwells. Are they half runs? Are they full runs? Are there stairs on the front and the back? Is it just a single set right there in the front and the middle? So how many turns do we have to negotiate? Once we get into them, can I take the extra line out the back? Do I need to pop it a utility room that's there in the center and take extra line in through there? Do I need to take it into an adjacent apartment? Can I loop it up in the landing? Can I push a charge section up against the wall and just loop that thing up against the wall? Because once I get to that landing and once I get to that fire apartment, I need to make sure that I have enough sitting there to make the furthest point in that fire room. So it's not just going to meet us. I need to have, a solid 50 feet to be able to make it to those back, 3 bedrooms if it's one of these bigger units. And if we come back out, maybe I'm in a more rural setting. I got to wait for other people. Maybe I do need to go to another floor. So to make sure we have that that line in place and we have enough, that's the bread and butter, right? That backup person on the engine company, they have their work cut out for them, but that's where they're worth their weight in gold. I'm a big fan of also keeping that line dry as long as possible until you get to that point to where, hey, I'm at the door, it's controlled. All right, now you can go ahead and charge it. I have as much slack as I need and I've managed it well, so it's not going to kink up. It's not going to get caught, under railings, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, that's what we got going on for making it to the actual apartment. Now, as I'm going in, me as the company officer, I'm taking in all these different, signs and signals. I'm also worried about the extension, typically in one of two ways. So that's going to happen either with it extending on the outside, leapfrogging up, right? Because of either one, the volume of fire, if it's one of these brick and mortar structures, the volume of fire might get it pushed up and out. Or if it's vinyl siding, that thing can take off quick. People can be inside, have no clue what's going on, and that thing is just rocking up the outside and into the top. So I got to worry about that outward extension. And then on the interior, those pipe chases, we have those common utility chases. So I'm thinking, okay, where is this fire occurring and how is it going to affect what's happening with, wastewater vents and kitchen vents and things like that? Because they're going to share usually a common chase. So we got to check those chases. The PVC might melt down. You have shoddy craftsmanship, the insulation around it, they might fail quickly. So those are the two things I'm really worried about with that extension. And firewall is kind of the same thing. I need to get a good idea of where they're located. Is it going to be on a far end of the group, or is it sitting there breaking down individual units? Does it go all the way up through the attic? And if it's not going all the way up through the attic, or excuse me, if it is going all the way up through the attic, I've seen tons in our first two, unfortunately, where they create like some type of man door to be for the workers and contractors to be able to get from one side to the other, and it's completely compromised. So under true fire conditions, that's obviously not going to help us out a whole lot. So yeah, once we get into these structures, it's just bread and butter, rooms off. That's awesome. We talked kind of about first floor fires. As these things start to escalate and maybe they extend up into the roof, I'm going to treat it like a residential home. So as soon as I get to the top of the stairwell, I'm going to take whatever I have to my advantage. So if there is a chase opening, if there is a scuttle hatch, I might pop that open really quick, see what I got, see if anything's above me. As soon as I can verify that that's clear right above me, then I can get into those apartments. I might start knocking it down, or excuse me, pulling some ceilings right there in front of me as soon as I enter in. So that way I'm not going headlong into this back bedroom fire and shoot, I realize I got stuff going on overhead of me. So I'm going to check that out. And if I do know that I have fire above me, it's obviously in the roof. One of the next things I'm going to do if I'm by myself in that engine company is the kitchen is one of the next rooms right through that main door, right? So I'm actually going to go in the kitchen myself and whoever's on the nozzle. I'm going to hop up on the countertops. I'm going to start opening up ceilings. And my nozzle firefighter, they're going to jump up on top of the fridge. It's kind of like a Hershey Park ride. It's a super cheap thrill, and it's going to be really quick. But there you got this really sweet pedestal of a refrigerator that they can just sit on. We get a little spot opened up for them. And if the truck company's not there or they're lagging, again, it's a rural department, you're a volunteer department, that nozzle firefighter can just sit there on top of that refrigerator and just have fun. And they got a 360-degree view, and they can just sit there. We don't have to worry about ladders and calling for extra equipment. You just got one Halligan bar and a charged hose line. You can do a lot of work just, sitting up in that kitchen. So we've kind of worked from the first, 2 to 3 couple minutes, hopefully. We've gotten in. Once we start getting things knocked down, garden apartment, there's an exposure somewhere. So no matter where you are, it doesn't matter if you're in the bottom. It doesn't matter if you're in the roof. You have things on all sides of you. Things can, work from top down, obviously bottom up. So again, checking the chases, checking the voids. I'm going to check all sides as these units start to, more units start to come in. But me as the engine officer, I just need to be able to communicate what I'm doing clearly. If I am operating on the backside, what my water supply plan is, where I'm taking these hose lines, what floor I'm operating on. But yeah, those are the first 2 to 5 minutes. I just took, probably almost 10 to 15 minutes to kind of break that down, but that's all happening pretty quickly. So, I just threw a lot out in a couple of minutes. That's like that first initial bread and butter. Hopefully I gave some people some good takeaways. And obviously I love nuance. There's a ton of nuance in things I just said. We can really dive deep into the weeds. I'm really talking about global things right here. So obviously any crazy questions or things I need to clear up, please shoot them my way.
We got a couple for you, Josh. So I got 2 for you, and then I'm gonna ask Schultz and Dan Shaw to ask you or comment 1 or 2 things. So my biggest one: how do you estimate and determine your stretch to these garden apartments or these apartment buildings?
Yeah, great question. Obviously, pre-planning is going to be one of the biggest first steps there, knowing your first due. But when we start visualizing, that's some of the initial parts of our crawl, walk, run training with extending hose lines, is just going out to these places and visualizing what it is. Hey, estimate that stretch. I know for me, when you look at the center stairwell, and just for that one garden apartment unit, not an entire group of 3 or 4, but just that one unit, whatever is on either side of that stairwell, loosely might be 50 feet. So, and a lot of times a setback, you can kind of estimate. People are really good at estimating what one rolled out section of hose is. So you take that 50 feet probably from where the pumper is sitting to the front of the building when you're first making access. Or like I said, I'll take half that building. Most commonly, my first due, that's about 50 feet. So if we're parked at the end of the building and I account for a setback, half that building plus a setback, I'm maybe looking 75 feet max for a lot of what we're running. And automatically I know if we have a 200-foot pre-connect to get into the stairwell, the lineman's running up to that stairwell and he's got the backup person behind him with hose still on his shoulder. We have tons of hose. There's things we're not worried about. So those are some of the little things, like just taking half that building, boom, 50 feet, account for the setback, and just getting the hose there, managing a couple turns, make up an extra 10% or whatever. But once you get into the stairwells, 3, 4 stories, we're not looking anything much crazier than that. So tons of hose for a lot of these pre-connects.
So Josh, what basically as the engine company officer, we've talked about your attack line and stuff like that, and I'm going to get Dan to ask you a question here about attack lines here in 1 second. But what do we do about water supply? What is your thought process on that?
Yeah, I'm fortunate to be in an area where 90% of my first due is going to be hydrogen, and we're going to account for that. I've had some of the old school officers tell me never pass a hydrant, or never pass a structure. Lay into the structure. I'll pass the structure all day, and I'll go to a further hydrant and extend a longer line. Maybe it was going to be a 200, maybe now it's a 300 or 400, because I'm going to clear out the entire front side for trucks and get more apparatus into this complex. So I am fortunate enough that we do have hydrants, but I'm going to sit on my own hydrant if possible. And worst case scenario, if I'm in a dead end somewhere, I'll lay in, but I'm going to park on the opposite side of, I think you had a couple pictures where you do have more of a court type setup, or it is more of a circular setup. I'm going to take the far side, and I'll run hose through the middle of medians and through these parking spaces. And a lot of the times, if it's under 200 feet, my driver will hand jack back to a hydrant. So maybe I will pull to a really awesome position that I want, and the hydrant's within 200 feet. As soon as the first truck comes in, that driver's already got that line hand jack back. So there's no excuse for not making up water within we train, and this should be common everywhere. As soon as before your tank water gets depleted of continuous running that line, you should have a positive water source coming from that hydrant, and that is done by just my driver. They should be able to handle that within that first couple minutes, even if they have to hand jack back. So we will account for water. We're not just going to pull up even if there's fire on all 3 floors. I'm not worried about setting up master streams and doing crazy stuff. It's just the first in engine company. I'm still going to pull hand lines. I'm going to keep things, exposures in check. We're still going to set up a positive water source. Me personally, I'm not really a big fan of setting up these crazy master streams just off the engine company, unless I'm in a position where I'm by myself for an extended period of time. You can do a whole hell of a lot with these, with well-coordinated attack lines.
All right. So Dan, there was a question in the Q&A about these 300, 400 foot lines. And I know that obviously when you and I were working together, we were using a 400 foot line that was 2.5 with a gated Y with an 1.75 inch on it. So what kind of line, as an old engine company person, that you're looking for, and what kind of flows are you looking for through these lines at an apartment fire, at these garden apartments?
You throw it to me or Josh?
You.
No, I mean, look, the gated Y we went away from just because the intention of the gated Y was to be on the pump panel for the pump operator to have more discharges, and to think that we're not going to have some measure of a hydraulic imbalance when we're sending water down a 2.5 inch hose line, and then somehow that inanimate object's going to know to delineate 150 here and 150 here. It doesn't work that way. So we're more focused on taking advantage of the technology of hose lines now with a much more laminar flow. The way that they do the linings and the interior bowl size of those hose lines, you can get some really great flows out of it. And then using bell reducers, just using a reducer to go from a 2.5 to an 1.75 or whatever you use, to make really long lines get in place. Because I'm sure, as Josh can attest to, is as the first line goes, it's usually how our fires go. If that's, you put a well-placed hand line in the hands of a skilled operator, magical things happen. So, I think for most of the residential we look at, I know for us, we do 175 or 185 because we give the captains the preference of using the fixed gallonage 175 GPM or a 15/16 smooth bore. So it's up to their preference, what they know about their first due and what the fire load they face. But in most applications, if we have a room off and it hasn't got up into a large attic space like this one picture here is showing, and you have no idea how long it's run, 175 in the hands of a skilled operator can do a lot of magical work.
All right. And then, I got my pad of notes here that you can't see because of my Zoom thing. But so Josh said something interesting that I'm going to ask Chief Schultz to comment on, or quiz Josh on, or whichever he wants to do. But when Josh was talking about attacking the first floor fire from the rear, he was talking about how they have a general order that says they go through that A side stairwell. So I was just interested in your perspective on that, Larry.
Yeah, so not to get too far ahead into the command piece, a couple things, at the very beginning of the show, you went through about, if my math is right, you went through about 80 years of building construction when it comes to garden apartments, everything from the 40s and 50s, where it was class 3 ordinary construction, to the 60s and 70s, where they started to use bastard construction. In other words, they were taking these 3s and adding a lot of components of a class 5 building to it, all the way up into the late 70s and 80s, where from then on out you were a lightweight. So I always like to caution anything I say to say it's just a piece of information. There's so many other factors that got to be taken into it. So there's a couple reasons that Josh was indicating he would do what he do. So whether it's a terrace level apartment that's got a slider as an entry, if it is a basement in a garden apartment, the garden apartment is not significantly different tactically from a private dwelling. When it comes to those lower level fires, the easiest way to attack the fire is on the same level, right? No different than the basement fire. But just like the basement fire, there are factors as to when that's a wise move and when it may not be the right move to make. So I think Josh hit a couple things. One, he's got to communicate it to the incident commander that he's deviating, that he's going to make his stretch to the Charlie side. The other key thing is there, before you decide to place that initial line on the opposite side of the fire, in other words, you're going to go in the Charlie side, you got to pay attention to what that stairwell is doing. That's the key piece. If you pull up and you got a dirty stairwell, that's where the line's got to go. You don't really have the time to come. The benefit of that rear attack is keeping the stairwell clean. You're not forcing that apartment door and you're going in there. You're keeping the stairwell clean. But if Josh arrives and the stairwell is already filthy, he's got to get his line in there and keep that stairwell open for occupants and everything else. So it's a good move. You just got to communicate it. You got to pay attention to the stairwell.
All right. Thanks, Larry. Scott Kraut, you with us? Scott Kraut?
Hey, Ricky, hold on, buddy. Sorry. I have to
All right.
learn how to use my phone.
And pay the bill.
What's that?
Love you, brother.
Huh? Hey, Chief, how are you, sir?
Josh, you're back on. Scott's out. Josh is on.
I always like getting a good
What's
view of Scott Kraut's nose when we do these things. It's
I'm sorry. I'm not good at the technology, Ricky. You know that.
I know that, brother.
If I get close, is that better?
So the next discipline that we're going to cover is the truck company, the challenges, the stuff that the truck company has to do with these apartment fires. And Scott was a longtime truck officer, and that's where I first knew him. And then whatever Scott doesn't actually, I'm sure he'll cover everything, but we got backup is Doug Mitchell up there waiting to back him up on that truck thing. Doug doesn't know what a hose is anyway, so,
Or
So Scott, go ahead.
Thanks for having my back, Doug. So I kind of break it down into, as in any structure, apparatus positioning, obviously first. And for these structures, it's quite unique. A lot of times it's so unique that you don't have a lot of choice. So you really have to look at where's this fire going. That coupled with, what type of apparatus are you operating in. But most importantly, your portable ladder placement. So not only are you looking at where the fire is going for the potential master stream, because unlike the residential single family, that we hope to not have to use the master stream, these places often give us hell, and that unfortunately sometimes is the end result. So it has to be an initial consideration, but a lot of times people forget, that we need to have the portable ladder access, because as we saw, a lot of those setbacks are quite lengthy. And so this is, as we talked about last week, this is one of those situations where you are going to pull those big ladders out potentially. And so the other thing I like to do when you're setting up your rig, as Josh alluded to, a lot of this is pre-planning. So I do prefer a ladder bed that alternates the tip and the butt end, so you're not having to make these circle movements with your portable ladder in the parking lot or as you're going through the through the garden there to get to the unit. So by having your alternating tips and butts, you can you can run straight to the objective without having to manipulate the ladder. Now, obviously, if you're unloading the ladder bed, then it is what it is. So once you've nailed your positioning down, then obviously, just like any other structure, you have to look at the search potential. And this is one of those fires we really need to, and Chief Schultz just alluded to, you really need to coordinate with the engine boss, because, and I talked about this last week too, in a small fire we had here recently in the garden department where I just happened to be running the line. We had an officer riding up, getting some training. And as Larry said, this officer was taking a lap as he should. And I was running the line that night, so I get to the top of the stairwell, and unbeknownst to the officer, the occupant tells me her husband might be inside. He made the audible to stress to Charlie, and to Chief Schultz's point, the stairwell was clean. So we could have made the Charlie stretch, but once I had word that potentially, there was somebody in there, I dropped the shoulder load, and we commenced to the alpha attack. So some confusion there, but to Chief Schultz's point, that's huge, because if just one of those units decides to dirty up the stairwell, then yeah, it's the moot point. So and then along with search, you look at the potential for the VEIS. If we're talking about a terrace level apartment and you have auto exposure, one of the things I think people get confused about is potential occupants trapped versus people stuck on balconies. And I think that's where you need to really take a look at what the real emergency is there. And are those people safe where they are? And then we go through normal operations, because we always say, if you get that fire put out, then those people on the balconies are fine. But if they're not, then we have to abandon that ordinary ladder placement potentially and our means of entry and get to this upper floor. So it can be a quite taxing operation for a truck company. And I know Chief Halton brought up last week, from a command perspective, I'm sure Chief Schultz and Chief Shaw will talk about this, but this is one of those things that has to be pre-planned. You have to know what resources you need. This is not a 2-in-1 fire typically. These buildings have the potential for auto exposure, for massive fire spread, and common cock lofts. And the unique thing about garden apartments is they're often stacked. So you're dealing with stacked utilities, because that's what makes them unique, makes them easy to build, and it makes them, different than most of our structures, is that you have these stacked utilities. So your pipe chasers and utility lines and things are stacked on top of the kitchen below. Is the same place as the kitchen above, etc. So you have to really pay attention to that. So your truck company can easily be overwhelmed. So positioning, portable ladders, search, and then obviously your ventilation considerations. So we talked about all the different styles, the different years of garden apartments, and all those garden apartment styles, based on when they were built, have unique ventilation challenges. The open stairwell is this new concept, and I know a lot of us have seen these large, what appear to be large fires that are quite impressive upon arrival, but you basically have a large fire in this open stairwell. So and this is engine company talk here, but a big water initially to reset this thing, and then mop it up, on the actual unit. So typically the truck company doesn't need to look at that fire and say, well, again, I think a lot of times we get wrapped up in that large fire, and we start, jacks start coming down, and we're looking at big water. And, as we know that, our primary goal with that aerial apparatus is the aerial, not the waterway. So just something to think about. I wrote a couple things down too. I know Doug always talks about this. It's always stuck in my mind. I think first time I met Doug, we talked about this in one of the classes, but to Josh's point, with the loops in the stairwell, that's huge for all special service applications because it's a stairwell heavy operation. So keeping those stairwells clean with not only the smoke, but keeping them clean from personnel and hose lines. You know, Doug's always talked about stacking up on one side, and you know, I've always thought about that and tried to pass that along. You know, we need to stack up on one side of the stairwell so that we can get other resources to floors above and stuff like that. Doug, you got anything? Kind of run down my list of priorities here.
I'm just
Yeah,
impressed.
Scott.
I'm impressed Doug was able to add to the conversation about engine ops.
Don't give him credit for that, Larry. He didn't add anything.
Did Doug add anything? I didn't hear anything.
No, I didn't hear anything. I think he said, "Yeah, bro."
Listen, first of all, Josh, well done on the engine portion, my brother. You said a few things in your piece that certainly bodes well and ties right in with what Scott just commented on. You know, first of being you engine guys, I'll give you credit. You are magicians when it comes to your hose and your extension of hose lines. So yes, if you could please position your apparatus out of the way for us to be able to use that aerial device, whether it's a rear mount, a mid mount, a tower ladder, a ladder tower, a tiller. You know, if you could give us the opportunity to put that ladder into play, that's a good thing. And, you know, you have the ability to add 50 feet at the front end, at the back end, and God bless you for being able to have a multiple, and that's the key, is to have multiple options to facilitate that hose line advance. Scott and I, as truck bosses, will tell you that we understand engine companies are going to put out the fire. We're going to help you facilitate to get that hose line into position and to try to get the trapped occupants out of harm's way. That is our function and our goal in the truck. Many times in these types of garden apartments, while I don't have garden apartments necessarily in New York City, they're still built the same way, just before 1940s, most of them. But some of them, they're all stacked. Again, by and large, the apartments line up. So when we talk about extension and where we're going to start or opening up, if the fire's in the kitchen, that's something that needs to be relayed, especially to companies that are going above. And I understand that in short-staffed departments and in the volunteer departments, going to the floor above may be kind of a second thought, but it is a very severely exposed position for people to be in, especially when you're talking about common stairwells and people being trapped. And as Scott mentioned, you know, you pull up and there's people on the balcony. Okay, are they in the fire apartment or are they on the floor above and they just in a smoke condition? While they have to be addressed, we have to obviously balance our resources and our abilities to prioritize our response. So yes, 99 times, maybe not 99 times, maybe 89 times out of 100, the aerial device is going to be out of play depending upon the setback, as you mentioned, right, Scott? 50 feet just from the parking lot, over 50 feet to the front of the building. How close now? We got parking spaces. That adds another 10 feet. So now we're talking 60 feet before we even, you know, put the jacks and outriggers down. How can we get our tools and equipment? How can we get our aerial and our portable ladders into position? So again, you mentioned it, Scott, you know, 35s, especially when it comes to those upper floors, they're going to be needed for those balconies. And do we have to do the one-man 35 that I know Sammy can do because I've seen footage of it? No, we don't have to put it on one hand on the shoulder. Just drag the ladder across the yard. The incident commander doesn't care how you get the person off the balcony. Just get them off the balcony. If you have to drag the ladder instead of doing the high carry and the one-man throw, just get the job done. So our primary concern, facilitating the engine company's advance and searching for life, right? Searching for life and protecting property. Forcible entry concerns. Again, using a two-team approach where you have an inside team that's going to be forcing the door and facilitating that engine company's advance, and an outside team that's going to be addressing those people on the balconies, coordinating ventilation from the exterior, either from those balconies or from portable ladders, and performing VEIS. Scott nailed it 110%. Even if we only have 3 people riding that truck company, 2 on the inside, One on the outside can be throwing portable ladders, and from the exterior even communicating and coordinating ventilation. So a 2-team truck company is paramount. The most effective or the minimum effective number would be a crew or a crew arriving with 4. So you could have 2 inside and 2 outside. Certainly taking advantage of that ladder company chauffeur, who is usually the older, more experienced member. So again, dragging that portable ladder into position, totally fine and acceptable for me. So with that inside and outside team approach, we should be able to force entry and control that door for the engine company's advance. Once that engine company officer gets there or a member of that engine company team, if we can control that door and leave it in the closed position so we don't contaminate that stairwell, closed but not locked. Obviously, we throw the deadbolt on it, just close it, put our Halligan there or put our Hydroram there to, just so it doesn't lock behind us. And then we can facilitate our search. First due in the fire department, what are we searching for? We're searching for the fire first. We want to find where that area of the fire is so we can get that engine company to facilitate their advance. And I'm sure Josh would say if a truck came back and said, hey, bro, come in the front door, make a left, and it's 20 feet down on your right-hand side in the back bedroom, he would be really appreciative of that advice. So if we can do that while we are also searching for victims, fantastic. Second due truck going to the floor above. Again, positioning. If maybe the first due ladder came in on side Alpha, maybe the second due truck is going to go around to the rears, to side Charlie, position their apparatus. Can they make the fire building? Can they not make the fire building? Again, conditions will dictate depending upon the ability, how the layout is, how the topography is, changes, etc. So again, that second truck that's going to the floor above, that inside team, again, we need to ensure that we let the first due companies know that we're going above. Going above the fire is one of the most dangerous places that we can be. So we get above the fire, and now we're going to start our search, that primary search, right from inside that front door. All right, and that's where we're going to do our coordinated search, right from the inside that front door through the apartment. Now we got to be listening. And I think it was Josh who mentioned before about listening to that radio and kind of the cadence of the job. Okay, we got positive water supply, charge the line. All right, you hear that line being bled out in that hallway. You hear them moving in. You hear them saying we got water on the fire. Or conversely, those other things that you're hearing is we got a dead hydrant. We got a burst length. Give me more pressure in the line. All of those things in the truck, you got to be thinking and listening for. That device that we have, that handy talkie or portable radio, is really a listening device by and large. So not only listening to reports from your officer and giving reports to your officer or to command, but just listening to the general cadence of the job and how it ebbs and flows. Those positives and those negative reports all come back to your actions. Remember, when you go into those apartments, you usually have 2 ways out: the way you came, and either a window or a balcony. In the garden apartment, by and large, you're going to have some sort of a balcony with a slider or a door that you may be able to exit. So again, that floor above, if you hear that inside team, you're going to the floor above and you hear the inside team below you struggling to find the fire area, and you're able to look out a window and tell them and give them the layout. Because again, that mirrored layout all the way up, all those floors by and large have the same layout. You may be giving them some great intel as far as where the seat of the fire is. I mean, you may be able to tell them, you come in the front door, there's a kitchen on your right, continue down, there's a hallway, and it's the last bedroom on the left. That's huge information for that inside team on that first floor, and for the engine company officer who's getting ready to facilitate that hose line advance. Now he can also pre-plan and prepare how much hose line he's going to need, how many turns he's going to have, just to get that hose line into position. Checking for extension once we've knocked down the fire, once the primary searches are complete and negative. And remember, every one of these apartments has a bathroom. So if your team has not found the bathroom, keep searching. You missed something, right? We got to check and make sure that we have at least someone has checked the bathroom. I was talking to a couple of friends of mine the other day. They had a job yesterday, and sure enough, they found somebody in the bathtub, right? Commonplace for people to go in the bathtub, in the bathroom. And again, no primary search is completed without ensuring that someone has hit the bathroom. Once that primary search is complete, the fire's been knocked down, we got to get to opening up. And I think Scott already covered, and Josh mentioned too about the stacking of the units. So if you're above, where you're going to go to check for extension first, find those void spaces. And a lot of it comes to your pre-planning, which again, Josh, you hit on the head when you first started, estimating those stretches. Well, get a piece of twine that's got 50-foot marks on it and see how many feet it is from the door to the apartment to the rig. And, if it's 300 feet, you're going to need 300 plus 50 as a buffer, right? 50 feet should not really complicate any engine company stretch. They should be able to manage that fairly easily. But knowing that ahead of time, and same thing with knowing, where you can position your apparatus in the truck company. You got a 75-foot mid-mount tower ladder, and it's 100 feet from the parking lot to the front door. Guess what? You're not going to be using that tower ladder to be rescuing anybody. So your job is going to either be, you might need to pull that out of the way and let the 100-foot rear mount come in, because he can now access the balconies on the first and second floor. So pre-planning is important. Get yourself into operations, talking about positioning the rig, covering two sides of the building. If you can definitely start the front and the rear. Do use the two-team approach, the inside and outside team, for successful operations on the fire floor and the floor above. Get those floors and those void spaces opened up after everything's been knocked down. Obviously, after that primary search is complete and negative, start getting those void spaces opened up. And again, communicate and listen to the cadence of the job as you move forward.
Wow, Doug,
Hey, Ricky.
I was impressed.
Hey, Ricky, can I just add a few, real quick? I don't want to take anything away from the squad and Sammy, because that's a super important job. Just I didn't want to move on, just because Doug just reminded me of a few things, and I wanted to answer a question for somebody online there, and I forgot his name because it disappeared from my little thing there. But he asked about a truss loft versus a cock loft, and I'll throw it out to you guys. I don't think there's any difference. I think they're one and the same as far as I know. But it is important that brought up another question, my image in my head, and that that's part of that pre-planning thing too. As you know, Ricky, a lot of those buildings, and you, Chief Shaw, over there in South Arlington, they started off as flat roofs, and 10 years later they put rain roofs on them. So getting out there and knowing what you're working on or under is super important. The other thing is, to Doug's point about losing your aerial on that setback. I'd be remiss if I didn't say get out there again, pre-plan your first do. A lot of these places through code have accommodated us by putting, and I don't know the exact terminology of it, by putting the pads underneath the grass or turf, usually marked with a chain of some sort. It's usually quite apparent what they're for. Get out there and talk to those building engineers and find out what they're rated for. Can you place your jacks down? 9 times out of 10, that's why they're there. So don't forget about that. And then the last thing I'll say is, I didn't realize there was so much magic involved in this engine company stuff. I heard a lot of magic talk.
They're like wizards, Scott. I don't want to know. I don't want to know what they do. Just let them do it. Get out of my way.
Lots of magic, Doug.
It's way too high tech for Doug. It's math, science, it's all sorts of
magic.
Things.
Lots of magic.
Magic, lots of wizardry.
Dan, did you want to comment on any of this? Dan, did you want to comment on any of this truck stuff, or are you good? You good?
Oh, no, I was asleep most of it. That's why I was still, yeah. No, he's spot on. I mean, look, as Doug and I always joke in class, and I think it's a mantra that comes from his department, is the engine goes to the burn center and the truck goes to metal day. So the engine facilitates the ability for the truck to get the rescues. And I think, all joking aside, is you have to have that relationship for you to be successful on the fire ground. And he's exactly right from the incident commander perspective. And I'm sure Larry can attest to it. You can too, Ricky. Is the commander's intent is that he just save lives and put the fire out. The manner in which you do it, could care less. Just go execute it. And I think it's that pre-planning and that working together and that coordination between those units is essential. And then to Scott's point, and then you go, what's the rescue do?
Okay.
Usually they bring snacks.
That's right.
It's always easy to identify the people that never worked on a rescue.
Josh, did you have something before we get to Sammy?
Yeah, two really quick points. Something I forgot to mention earlier, and Doug just mentioned it now, is for estimating those stretches. Let's say you're just having crazy busy days. One of the firefighters on our wagon made just basically a spool of rope. It's got a carabiner at one end, and every 50 feet it's marked. We know exactly how much it is. We try to make it a game to actually pull lines as much as we can. We'll visualize it, we'll guess it, we'll stretch, we'll go through all kinds of apartment buildings. The residents like, hey, what are you doing? And they love it once they figure out what we're doing. But you're having those crazy busy days, or it's supposed to snow like crazy tomorrow. We have this wheel of rope that we can just hook to something really quick and then get a quick estimate on the stretch, or actually get the exact stretch of what it would be. And we just wind it right back up again. We can save time if we're having a crazy busy day, you're in a busy company, and that just stays in the back with the firefighters. Another good visualization drill that we use is, I think somebody kind of mentioned it in the chat, is every single morning our company will get on Zillow or one of the real estate websites, pull up your first due. And these real estate companies are opening the doors to all these structures. So you can look at pre-plans. You can look at the crazy shoddy work that somebody has done after the fact without permits, and they're taking pictures of it. Every single home might have anywhere from 5 to 60 pictures of their homes, and everything from garden apartments to high rises to single families. So every morning, jump on Zillow, see what's going on in your first due, and you're going to be blown away at the construction and the layouts of these joints. And it also brings some good luck. A lot of times we'll run fires in these structures and we know exactly what's going on. So there's a lot of free information out there. Jump on Zillow, figure some stuff out and make you a wheel of spool you can keep in the back of the wagon for those busy days.
Hey, Rick.
Yes, sir.
I want to just touch on a couple final truck things that I don't know we necessarily talked about. There was a good question from somebody on a short staff truck company about laddering in garden apartments. And, a truck company's already got 1 million tasks to do. Not having the people to do it all makes it even more complicated. So, obviously it goes without saying that laddering is important, exterior laddering. But when you're running a short truck company, it really is going to come down to what you see when they get there and sizing it up. If you've got a fire that looks fairly well compartmentalized, maybe you get away with laddering the fire floor and the floor above, and then that's what you're going to get after that, right? Then you got more important things to do. You got a search to get after, and you got if it's a top floor job, you got the roof to start accessing and open it up. So it is going to be strategic laddering. It's great for people that talk about throw every ladder until you don't have any ladders. If you got 7 people on a truck company, that's brilliant. If you got 2, you got 9 different priorities to do, and you got to strategize them. I would say at a minimum, you got to cover that fire apartment and the floor above. And then after that, you're going to have to get after some other work. So it makes absolutely no sense to spend so much time laddering the exterior of the building for a suspected. Certainly, if you see an obvious rescue, that's one thing. But doing that at the expense of not getting a search done and not getting to the attic area doesn't make much sense. So you're going to have to size it up when you get there. The other question and truss lofts and cock lofts and those things. Look, one of the most important thing the truck company or depending where you're at, it may be the rescue, that you got to do is be able to size the roof up. There's a couple key things, especially in those 60s to 80s garden apartments. You're generally going to find with flat roofs 1 of 2 situations. One where it really is kind of truss loft. In other words, there's very little space up in the cock loft area. The ceiling and the roof are sandwiched by the roof beams, and so the good piece of that is you're really just worried about extension from the Alpha side to the Charlie side. In other words, there's not a lot of east and west extension in those. It's generally running the trough. But certainly you got to get up there, open it up, and but at least you can focus your efforts on where to open the roof up and where you need to focus on extension. When you get into that true cockloft where you've got that space between where the ceiling is and where the roof beams are, well, then you got to worry about extension in every direction, and opening up at that point becomes a bit more complicated. Then Scott talked about a roof over, where you're putting a pitch roof over top of it. But as that void space gets bigger up there, your problems get significantly worse when it comes to rapid fire spread. So the truck company getting up there, sizing up the roof, really talking about what type of roof it is and what direction the troughs are running become critical. And when you get those big open spaces up in the attic, especially with the buildovers, rapid fire spread quickly. So good size up of the roof of the truck company is critical.
All right. So now we're going to move to the rescue portion. I just have one quick question from the slide that we have up. Sam, how do you see the keys of the MDT when you're riding the seat of this thing?
It's I just asked for help. No, I do want to touch on the cockloft and the truss loft, or truss pitch. The thing is, it will move a little bit slower on you in the cockloft, especially if it's having trouble getting air. But the problem is, it doesn't feel that way sometimes, because while it moves a little bit slower than those big open areas, it's also tends to be a little bit slower to get them opened up, whether that be from the bottom or the top. You get into the old stuff, you get into that lath and plaster, it's going to take time to make a sizable hole that's meaningful for the line to get up there. And up top, when we start making that flat roof cut, it just doesn't go as quickly as something that we can louver.
And that's the point, Sam, right? There certainly there's some benefits to that truss loft. It limits that extension, but it is critical to get up there and identify what you have before you start deploying a bunch of tactics.
So before Sammy gets on his, somebody might have to remind, but there's two good examples of that older construction in that open cockloft area. Orlando, Florida, just had one that they have some very good video as they first arrive on the scene. They got a fire in the center of this long building, and you can see smoke just pushing out of everywhere from the soffit area down both eaves. And then I want to say it was just one here recently in Georgia where they had a bunch of people jumping at the building. It's pretty dramatic of the look of the attic when they get there also. So maybe somebody remembers where that's at. So our people that are watching, go look that up on YouTube or the internet or something. So, all right, Sammy, what do you do on this big box that says special operations on it? What do you do when you show up to the Department of Fire on that thing?
Yeah, whatever we need to do. We operate like a true squad company. If they need help with the search, if they need the roof opened up, last commercial we went to, Scott Kleinschmidt, who was our new battalion chief, congrats to him. An outstanding thing for our job. But he asked for my OV to go up and help with the roof. So we really do fill in where the needs are. As far as searching goes, that's obviously going to be something that our culture is very strong with. Mitchell really nailed it. Most of the things that I would talk about, he hit. We're searching for life, and we are searching for fire, particularly on these. If we go up and we're in a smoky room and we vent a window, we need to stick our head out and take a look and see if there's extension that we're unaware of. When we leave something, we need to make sure that the doors are shut. If we see that a line needs to go in place somewhere else, not only do we need to ask for that line to be considered, but we need to tell them how many lengths they're going to need to get there. Any obstructions that they might encounter on the way up. I'll tell you one thing that I think that we could do a lot better in the fire service, and maybe this is just geographically, is make a scene coming into these things. Too often we're used to shutting down our sirens as we come into the complex to be courteous. You know, at night, let's keep this thing going, especially if you're first due. Let's make as much noise as we can. Let's get as many people woken up as we can. Not only can they self-evacuate, but also they can give us information that we might not be seeing, right? And I'll just say this, because again, you know, Mitchell he really did nail it. And you would expect that, you know, he's a good truck boss. These are big footprints. Okay. I consider these things like search is like going to an amusement park as a kid. You go to the amusement park as a kid and you come back as an adult and you're like, I remember it being much bigger than this. When you're moving around these structures in smoke and then the smoke clears, you go back and you're like, wow, this really isn't as big as I thought it was. The other thing is we need to be moving with a purpose. We've got a lot of footprint to cover. Guys say, you need to be searching on your knees. If I can't see my knees, then I'm on my knees. But if I can see my feet, then I'm on my feet. We're trying to get as much of this covered as we can before fire extends to it should the engine fail or something goes wrong on us, right? But we need to be moving with such a purpose. At the end of a search, at the end of a really good search, the next morning you should wake up with bruises and not know where they're from. You should be beat up. The other thing I would say as far as meeting up with the line boss, which he already touched on, is this is a good opportunity for you to get an idea of how much fire there is, but also kind of assess how they're doing. Are they confident that they're going to hold it? They're confident that they're going to extinguish it. And it also gives you a chance to get a good feel for just how much heat's coming off that and how much time you have to operate in that area.
You done, Sam?
Yeah, I think so.
Nah, there's no way you can be done. No way you can be done.
Like I said, he hit a lot of really good points.
How much emphasis are you putting on your forcible entry person on the rescue, or for that fact, the truck on controlling that fire apartment door?
Well, it kind of goes back to what we discussed in a recent Google Hangout. Fire door control is just that. It's door control. It doesn't mean door closed. So that's really a position for the engine to manage that portion of it and figure out how much of it to open. If we've got a vent out in front, we want the thing wide open, let that smoke go out, replace that smoke with clean air. If we're having trouble, then we need to get that door shut and not feed the fire until the line is actually in place. But as far as the forcible entry component goes for us on a search, we're going to be popping a lot of apartment doors. Luckily, we work for a department where we're not afraid to create damage. We're very adamant that every apartment gets searched. Even if we don't think smoke has really touched it, at the very least, if we can't justify popping that door and doing a search, we're going to make sure that we get a building rep there, and we're going to open that up and make sure we don't have somebody with a respiratory illness that got knocked out by some of the CO from the fire.
So Sam, you brought
Right.
Go ahead. Can I? Go ahead, Larry. I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead, Rick. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
So Sammy, one of the questions I got here then is, I go back to a fire many years ago that resulted in a line of duty death in Baltimore County, about doors and windows. And so when you're searching these adjacent apartments, what are we teaching our firefighters to do once we pop that door? What do we do with the door after that? Once you go in and start doing your search?
Again, I mean, that's something that you're going to feel. I'm assuming you're talking about the one Adam St. John reviewed, where the slider on the bottom floor.
I don't know who
was
Adam
open.
St. John is, but I know that you do.
Okay,
He's the guy. It's the same firework. He's from
Okay.
the ATF. He did the Mark Falkenhand line of duty death.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. When we leave an apartment, we need to shut it. If we're concerned with auto exposure, like you kind of see in this picture right here on the slide, then pull the window treatments down. If the windows are open, shut it. And then again, close the door when you leave.
Larry, I'm
Sam,
sorry,
but
go,
To
bud.
tell you that we actually go in and shut the door on ourselves when we do a search. I mean, and the realities, if we're worried about fire coming in after us, yeah, we're going to certainly do that. But most of the time we're trying to get in, get a quick search, get back to the door, and then we'll shut it on our way out.
Ricky, I'll try to cover, and Dan Dan will jump in as well. I'll try to cover that piece of search when we get to the tactics point. But Sam, talk a little bit about orientation, right? Orientation is a big issue in garden apartments, especially for the search company. So talk a little bit about orientation to the structure as well as search priorities.
Okay, so the orientation kind of goes back to, again, something Mitchell hit on. You know, every apartment's going to have a bathroom. You know, every apartment's going to have a kitchen. So we can size up that footprint. There are certain things that we should be expecting, whether it be a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom. We now got to make sure that we actually get into make sure that all of those areas are searched. We also know that apartments tend to have some commonalities as far as an adjoining laundry room that goes between the 2 different wings or other components. And that really comes down to kind of knowing your area and knowing how your things are built. As far as the search orientation with the crew, when we search, I'm very big on going out in front, finding the rooms, and then I will actually stick my hand out and call them, because a lot of times what we'll have is apartment doors that will actually open to the same wall, right? So if I just tell a guy that, hey, you've got a room on the left, which room do I know that he went in? I don't, right? So I will actually post up in front of the door I want them in. I'll try to kind of sweep inside, get an idea of what it is, because if it's a small room, then I expect them to be back fairly quickly. If it's a large room, I know that I've got a little bit more time to go up in front and find the next place we're going to search. But going backwards, I put my hand out. When they come up, I will physically grab them and put them in the room that I want them to be in. And then I will verbalize what I expect when they come out, whether that be come out, let me know when it's clear and stay there, or come out and I want you to go left. Does that answer your question?
I'm just trying to help you along, buddy.
Hey, let's talk about thermal imagers while we're here.
Oh.
No. Sammy, you good?
That's what he's using to force the doors with.
I just can't wait to, because I listen to Wichita a lot on, Broadcastify. I just can't wait to hear Scott be in charge of Sammy at a fire. I mean, that those competing things will just be entertainment, pure entertainment to listen to. All right, so Sammy, if you're done, we're going to move on to Larry and Dan.
Yeah.
All right, Sammy, good job. Thanks for representing, buddy. Hey, Danny, I'll just kind of go through a series of things, and at each block I'll stop and add on, brother.
Yeah, anything I can do to help you out, man.
Thanks, bro. Thanks, bro.
No problem, bro.
Sammy, don't forget to tell people during search, don't hang out in stairwells, don't hang out in the hallways when it comes to orientation. You hang out in the hallways, you hang out in stairwells, you eventually going to get yourself caught in a bad situation. So
yeah, actually, that actually just happened to us at an apartment fire. We were waiting on the line. It was getting pretty bad in the hallway. Trying to get back down the stairs was going to delay the line. So we ended up just going up the stairs a little bit further and popped in an adjacent apartment and took refuge till the line got in place.
Perfect. So Ricky's given Dan and I about 15 to 20 minutes to effectively teach you how to burn a garden apartment down. And we'll do our best at that. But all kidding aside, garden apartments are complex. I talked about why, because of the building construction and the various transformation that these buildings have gone through over time. So I'm going to stay broad. Dan can narrow in on things, but I like to stay broad and offer incident commanders a perspective because at the end of the day, these things are complicated. You don't have a lot of time to make a decision. So what I'm going to offer is for you to try to focus on a few key things and not be distracted by all the different things going on there, because at the end of the day, I think Josh said this at the very beginning. The garden apartment is, especially when you're talking about fires on floor 1 to the top floor, don't defer a lot from what you do in a private dwelling. Everything from fire loading to hose selection, the tactics in which you're employing. Don't overcomplicate the issue. Floor 1 and the top, everything from floor 1 to the top floor. Keep it simple and do what you do good every day, and you're generally going to have some success there. But there are some nuances, anomalies in garden apartments that Dan and I can kind of talk you through to think about. But overall, the keep it simple, and the 3 things that I like to pay attention to before I start off on the strategy. So again, the first piece is understanding the strategy. What do we want to accomplish? What mode are we going to operate in? And then we can dip into tactics. But the anomalies I would try to get an incident commander to really pay attention on are those searches. Everything in a garden apartment is going to be about a search, and you got to get those searches protected. Ricky alluded to this when he talked about the Mark Falkenhand fire in a garden apartment. Remember, the occupancy in a garden apartment can look much like a high rise with none of the fire protection that the high rise building gets with it. So getting that search done and protecting the search is a critical factor that has got to drive your tactics. The second one is focus on the highs and the lows. In other words, basements and attics. First floor to top floor, don't sweat it. It's an easy fire to put out. When it's in the basement and when it's in the attic, you're going to have to play around with it a little bit and adjust some of the tactics. And then the third thing again is that stairwell. Guys, we got to pay a lot of attention to the stairwell. If you show up, if you can keep the stairwell clean, most of your problems go away. But once the public stairwell gets infected, the clock is pushing, and you got to get after it. So, good aggressive searches, focusing on attic and basement fires, adjusting what you're going to do on those 3, and then really paying attention to the stairwell are really going to be the top couple priorities that I like to take a look at before I start making the decisions. Dan?
Yeah, I mean, Larry, you kind of lead into, these finite points. I mean, I think it comes down to, I know you will probably agree with me on this, is Larry and I could think and believe, and maybe one day you show up, you're the best damn incident commander on the face of the earth. None of that makes a difference if small unit leaders don't do their job well in that zero visibility environment. You know, a lot of times we're just trying to orchestrate the efforts of those people who are arriving first and operating in that. And the incident commander's job is to bring some measure of calm to chaos and coordinate all those efforts. So when I think about all the things we talked about tonight, I always come back to really the 3 pillars of incident command. I always focus my efforts on and try to share with the battalion chiefs I have and the captains who are filling in, the captains who are coming up. And a lot of that from watching other great incident commanders, good leaders, people like Larry, Ricky, who have been in incident command roles, watching what they do, and some trial and error on my own part. And really those 3 pillars are, you're there to provide strategy and tactics based upon what you see and what you hear and make sure they match. Second, you're there to provide a measure of accountability. You have to know where everyone is operating, and you better have the resources either on the way or at the ready to go get them if they get in trouble. And the last, as Larry and Ricky have said for many times in one of their classes, your job is to recognize red flags or anomalies, and most importantly, act. And so if we think about all the things we talked about this evening that we broke down, I was kind of jotting down like where all these things we talked about feed into that. So when we talk about providing strategy and tactics based upon what you see and what you hear, for me as an incident commander, that starts with that on-scene report. How well that person can communicate what exactly they're arriving at drives the entire incident. Starts it. You tell me it's a 3-story garden style apartment, instantly thinking about I have to search 3 floors for fire and for life, and we have a huge life hazard because it's an occupied garden apartment. Simply by you saying that statement on the radio, you started driving the strategy and tactics towards it. That building construction is huge, right? I mean, you have to know, as Larry says so eloquently, is you have to know your building stock. If I'm going to one area of our county that is all ordinary construction with a flat roof, that's essentially fire inside a block wall. But if we're going to another area that is all lightweight wood frame construction with an enormous lumber yard as the top floor and the fire has a hold of that attic, that's a little different. So that building construction knowledge. And one of the things I will always ask an incident commander when I walk up to the command post, and that is the decision making for, do they have good command presence or are they commanding this incident, is very simply, where is the fire? We focus so much on the extinguishment effort that sometimes people forget about the locate, confine, compartment, then extinguish. And if you don't know where the fire is, then the fire is running you. You're not running the fire. Because we focus our efforts to put the line right there on the fire, and then we start to compartment that fire, which then facilitates the searches. The status of the stairwell, right? Again, that drives a lot of what we're talking about when it comes to strategy and tactics. I need to know the status of that stairwell because just like I think Scott was talking about, as Doug talked about, is if you have a polluted stairwell and it is 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm guarantee you the first company that gets on Side Charlie is going to tell you they have 20 rescues. Because what did all those people do? They can't come out the front door, they run out the back. And that leads to that language, right? Evacuations versus rescues. You need company officers to make a clear delineation between those two. Evacuations, they're inconvenience. They're not going to die because they're not in the fire apartment. But they're on the balcony, this is the worst day of their life. They think they need to be rescued. A calm, cool, collected company officer could bring calm to chaos by saying, hey, we got some evacuations, removals we have to do inside Charlie. The accountability aspect, right? Just again, in the language of what we say on the radio is so important. For me, and I'll allow Larry to add anything he says in there. I want to know the number of apartments on the floor. I want to know if there's 4 apartments on that floor, if there's 2 apartments, there's 3 apartments. Because when you tell me, hey, I'm on the 2nd floor in apartment 201, now I know that I got 2 more exposures we have to go into. We have to search because that's why we're there, right? We're there to find people. So having that information, if you give the apartment number, it's great. But more important than that, and it's something that I know in our region we've become really good at, is part of that, the completion of that LAP or 360 report, is that first in company officer labeling the floors. If he says it's 3 in the front, 4 in the rear, he comes back and says it's terrace 1, 2, 3. Then we know we have a common language across the incident that everyone's going to refer to on that. And that helps with our accountability, because if you tell me you're in apartment 401 and we just labeled it terrace 1, 2, and 3, something's not jiving. And I need to have good accountability. I got to know where you're operating. And that last one is, that recognizing anomalies and acting. That's all those things I think the guys have talked about so well throughout the course of the incident. The evacuations versus rescues, right? The incident commander has had the ability to listen to what is being said and not just solely react, but to think and act appropriately. So are they truly rescues? Because then you're going to exhaust an enormous amount of resources to go do this. Something else is going to suffer. I mean, I'm fortunate where I work and we're resource rich. I know Doug is. Some places aren't. So if you send 3 units to Side Charlie just to go throw ground ladders that maybe 1 unit could do, something's going to happen on the inside. It's going to suffer on that. The stairwell's polluted, right? We talk about the middle of the night. Those people are going to run that back. And I would be remiss if I didn't say we talk about the new construction and that type of thing we encounter. Back in February, we had a fire in a building under construction, garden-style apartment under construction. That was such a large fire that it registered on the radar for the National Weather Service. When you have 700,000 square feet of apartment buildings under construction on fire, it is really, really important for the company officers, when they arrive, the incident commanders, to be able to pull back and recognize that buildings under construction, this is a lesson for us. They build these monstrosities, those donut styles. They're not required by code to have one portion of it under drywall and another portion not. You had 700,000 square feet of lightweight wood construction with not one stitch of drywall in it. So when you have fire on 2 floors upon arrival, it just walked the dog throughout the entire structure. So again, coming back to the strategy and tactics, you know, what drives that? What that first company officer says when they mark on the scene really drives what it is. And to Larry's point is your ability to think a little more global and think, you know, you look at a picture like this fire right here. Yeah, that's not a one-line fire. And if you think you're leaving in the next 15 minutes, something's wrong. You're not having good command presence. So yeah, I know a little longer in the tooth than normal, but you know, probably not normal, Larry. But just adding, just you know, all the conversation really stimulated some thought and things I jotted down. But I'll turn it back over to you.
It's all good, buddy, and all spot on. So kind of setting those tactical priorities up, Dan hit the nail on the head, right? Garden Apartments, it's about the primary search, and it's about putting the fire out. It's about people and pushes. And you hear me overemphasizing the importance of the primary search. At the end of the day in the garden apartment, getting the primary search completed and protecting that search are your first couple priorities. Once that is accomplished, put the fire out and then start working on your extension. Don't overlook the primary search and committing the right level of resources to be able to do that. One of the biggest things I've seen in incident commanders, especially younger incident commanders, is they pull up at the garden apartment, it's nighttime, they got a room and contents, they got a fire coming out of a couple windows, they have a couple people standing on the balcony, and you start to lose your mind and you become consumed by those distractions, right? Again, don't overplay, don't get overcaught by what you see that makes your eyes light up. Hey, I see fire getting into the attic. A lot of times that's all very normal. People on balconies are normal. Doug Mitchell said it. Are they inconvenienced or are they trapped? If they're inconvenienced, they're going to be inconvenienced for a little bit longer. So when you pull up, don't be distracted by those things. Stay focused on the pushes, stay focused on the primary search, and after that, when that's done, get into those exposures. The other thing Dan hit that's head on is orientation in the garden apartments and how you're naming things. Garden apartments are not always simple. It's not always as simple as a floor 1, 2, and 3. I was out with a crew from our Brooklyn station the other day. We were looking at a garden apartment that looked far more like a series of split level homes than it did. So we were talking about how you name that, how you communicate. And we didn't come up with an answer. What we did come up with is what everybody else here said tonight. It's your building, get in there, figure it out, put a pre-plan together, and be able to communicate to the chief where you're operating in the building. Those buildings can be confusing on a blue sky day. At nighttime with the stairwell charge, forget about it. The other thing Dan said is RECIO. Don't forget the simple piece of RECIO. I think, I don't know, I think we've changed that mnemonic several different times. I came up with my own GIG, SP, SEF. In essence, get inside, get searching, protect the hallway, and put the fire out. And that should help remember what to do with that.
That's a long tattoo, Larry.
It is a very long one. Get those stairwells protected. Remember, if you lose a stairwell, you're going to lose people. It really is that simple. Keep the line in place and let the rescue companies save people, right? That's how it's supposed to work. You keep the line in place, let those rescue companies do what they do best and save people. Size matters, so you need to dedicate several companies in the search, and that's what Sammy said. You take a 4-person rescue and you want them to get inside and conduct a primary search on 16 apartments, you're heading in the wrong direction. Focus on people, which is the searches, and pushes. Those are my first 2 priorities, Dan. How about you? What you got following on to that?
Well, I mean, I come back to something that, you know, guys I work with will probably they get sick of hearing because I say ad nauseum, but, you know, as an incident commander, you can never forget the fire always gets a vote. No matter how lazy or tired or, you know, whatever the case is, You show up, the fire's not going to stop because you don't have the right resources, or someone made a bad game plan, or someone's not communicating. You have to fix it. You have to be able to act appropriately to fix that problem. And for incident commanders, the biggest thing to always remember is, like, when we roll up and you're trying to get your handle on this incident, is that everything we're doing, I always come back to the Powell Doctrine, right? You don't put people in harm's way for unclear purposes. So who has ever been on a fire where you're inside going, I don't really know what we're doing? I know I've been on those fires before, and that's a downfall and a failure of incident command, where it's not clear, and it comes back to the core things you talked about, Larry. If we're not even we're all on the same page, if we're offensive or defensive, and there's people inside, that's the problem. It has to be very clear what our mode of operation is, and then what we're focusing our efforts on. And we have to be able to communicate that well. And I think to your point of talking about whether it's doing walkthroughs as an assistant chief of ops, or how you communicate things, is making sure you understand what exactly you're asking people to go do, and there's a clear plan and it's communicated well. And that means you've rehearsed these. And that's why, as you go through do walkthroughs, am I doing a walkthrough and looking at estimating the stretches? Yeah, sure, because it's cool, and I wish I was riding an engine sometimes. But more often, you're trying to rehearse, how would I say what this building is? And how would I say if I want to put a line on the third floor and there's 5 apartments on that floor, how would I communicate that? Would I do it by the quadrants? Would I do it by the apartment numbers? So just like a firefighter going through to rehearse how they would stretch the line and how they would throw a ground ladder or how they force entry, as an incident commander, you should be rehearsing, hey, when I run this building, I already got this in the slide tray. I'm waiting for the opportunity. I'm just salivating up and see this fire like we have here, because I already have a plan for it. I've already rehearsed it.
Dan, let's cover a little bit of the strategy for hose line deployment, and then touch a little bit on vent, and then we'll let Ricky kind of tell us what the time looks like. We had a question about hose line deployment. And again, I offered at the very beginning that you shouldn't stray too much from what we do in private dwellings, because at the end of the day, the way fire and smoke move through a class 3 or a class 5 building is going to very predictably behave the same way in the garden apartment. So if you think about it, I know we don't always think of this as the key component of that first line, but the primary reason we stretch that first line is to protect the occupants. It's the primary reason. Now, doing that, most of the time, that line is also in the best position to extinguish the fire, and that's perfect. That's what we wanted to do. So let's assume that first stretch is going to protect the stairwell place and be in position to get between the fire and the occupants and eventually extinguish the line. That's pretty simple. The question was, where do we deploy 2 and 3? So I'm going to ask Dan to elaborate that, but I'm going to talk a little bit about philosophy on it, right? In general, the second and third line, and even the fourth line, it really depends on where each line is going. So if I'm stretching line 1 to the apartment, then my second stretch has a couple options. I can become a second line. I can go above. I can go to the side. I got a few options here. So what I'm offering is that as the first due company, if you'll take a minute and communicate where you're making your stretch. I'm stretching through the front door to the apartment on the first floor. Then it allows that next engine in, that second due engine, to listen to that, pull up on the scene, look at the critical factors of the building, and then make a decision. I know some of these decisions based on where line 2, 3, and 4 go are driven by SOGs. Go wherever your SOG tells you to go. What I'm going to offer you is it ought to be thoughtful and not a mechanical decision. You know where the first line is? Look at the building, figure out what the next critical priority is. And if that engine boss will communicate, hey, I'm making my stretch to the adjoining apartment, I know you're going to go to the side and you're protecting that horizontal exposure. So maybe the third line decides to go above. My point is there's no one size fits all. If an engine company boss communicates where their lines are going, the other incoming engines can hear that. And when they get on scene based on where those lines are going, it makes it easier for them to determine where the next line should be placed. So Dan, the primary is in place, that first stretch is in place. Where's that second, third, and fourth headed?
Yeah, well, I mean, you kind of answered already, Larry. I mean, I go back to, again, the fire is going to dictate this to us. And I will, I think you hit on this, but I think it's always worth going back and re-emphasizing. It is not a backup line. Obviously, as you and I know, working together previously, it is semantics to some people, and they just say pull backup line. But if you always preach that, where's that second line always going to go? If you say the second line is a backup line, it's always going to go where the first line went, because that's what they're ingrained to do. So we go by second line, third line, fourth line, and I come back to as incident commanders, as company officers, we want thinking firefighters, and dynamic situations demand dynamic decision making. So when you get to this dynamic situation called a fire, which always gets a vote, you have to be able to look at it and say, where's that fire traveling? So, and you hit on it, Larry. I mean, one of the things we really want to harp on is not everything has to come back to the incident commander and then back down to the other person. Whether it's our outside communication, that's the outside vent person talking to the engine officer or senior products of extinguishment. When it's the first line is pulled, the expectation is that second engine officer is having some measure of a face-to-face, mostly because we arrived so quickly, of where they can see where that first line is being stretched. So he gave a good on-scene report. I know where the fire is because he completed a lap and said it's 3 in the front, 4 in the rear. Fire's in the terrace level apartment. I'm taking my line down the basement stairs. Okay, so I know where he's going. He doesn't need a backup line to back him up. So I'm going to take my line to that second floor and be able to protect it from auto exposing up into there. So it always comes back to is like, you have to read, you have to have good operational doctrine in place. Good communications, good positioning, expectation of where hose lines go. Back to your point, Larry, of, hey, that first line is to protect the occupants. And sometimes the greatest thing we can do to protect the occupants is put the fire out. And if we can do both at the same time, fantastic. But listening to what is being said and acting appropriately as a small unit leader is essential. And one part about operational doctrine, whether it's SOGs or SOPs or operational manuals, those things are legacy documents of our experience of things that worked. And they're meant to guide you on the fire ground, not hinder you. So, when you get to a fire that doesn't fit within the doctrine of the manual, the expectation is you can think on your feet and adapt to the environment and know why you're doing what you're doing. So I think there is no hard, fast answer of like the second line must go to this spot. It must go to the best place to keep the fire confined in compartment and extinguished so you have the best probability to save lives.
Perfect. Ricky, I know it's 9:01. The last thing, just a couple minutes, the last thing I'll touch on. So we covered the importance of the primary search, protecting the stairwell, the additional lines for extension. And then the last critical piece of strategy for extension is getting up in that attic area or cop loft, again, depending on the roof. And the reality is you can't even figure out where to go with the roof until you size it up properly. And I know I said that earlier, but this is a good building where that roof report is critical, where we're really looking at the location and the extent of the fire, what the construction of the roof is, what type of roof is, and where the main source of the fire is coming from. I think when we size it up and we know those three things, we can begin to open access. We know that often the easiest way to make access to that attic or cop loft area is from the inside, getting inside, pulling the ceiling, and then making quick work of it there. Just try, from a strategic point, you want to stay ahead of the fire If you're going to open up the roof for trenching, if you're going to open up the ceiling to trench the ceiling, you just got to do that well ahead of the fire. Otherwise, by the time you get it done, the fire's there, and then you're just retreating back another 15 feet to make the cut. As far as resources go, it's a lot of resource work. If you think it's a 3-saw job, send 9 saws up there. You go through saws and saw blades a ton a minute. And then the last thing from the incident commander point is if you're going to open up that roof area and get into the roof in a garden apartment is critical. When you got a top floor job, when you have high heat conditions in the stairwell, opening that roof is critical for the search. But if you're going to send companies to the roof, protect them with a hose line up there as well. Dan, anything on roof work?
Well, I think the one big point is, I think when people run, as we see a lot of line of duty death and close call reports, right, is the application of residential tactics to every structure you run, because that's what we run in the United States. What's every 63 seconds is a residential building fire. So we get ingrained to residential tactics every single time. And you may not be a department that goes up on many residential structures and does vertical ventilation. So you kind of don't look at that when you're taking your lap. And one of the things we always want to really stress is you're taking that 360, it's 6 sides of the box. Make sure you look up. Make sure you see what exactly that roof looks like. Is there a fire stop that's built in that roof? What is the quality of that roof? What do the conditions look like on side Charlie? So when you get to that point of what you're talking about, Larry, that, hey, we think we have to tactically make a decision to commit resources to the roof, you've done some measure of an assessment. We stress in the commercial building fires we run that, hey, we want a roof report by that second new truck that gets up there and reports things directly to the incident commander. Well, in these large structures like this, where we anticipate that you may be going up to the roof at some point, depending on where the fire is, you better have a reason, and you better know what you're doing up there and what the purpose is.
All right. You good, Larry? You're good?
Yep.
All right, well,
how to burn a garden apartment down in 15 minutes or less.
And you just back that car up and you leap.
yeah, I had some IC stuff, but we've been running pretty late here. We're about an hour and 30 some. We're in pretty good. So we're just going to probably shut off here. Anybody want to give some final thoughts here before we close up for the night?
Man.
Doug, is that-
I'll piggyback on what Chief Schultz said.
Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays.
I do want to I want to piggyback on what Chief Schultz said about trenching from the inside too. We've actually had guys go in some of these things and use the chainsaws to open up the long hallways, so that we can get lines as that fire comes through that peaked roof. And that's been pretty effective.
Gotcha. Josh? You good?
Yeah, I'm good. Appreciate everybody being here.
No, man, thank you for being on. All right, so we're going to kind of close it up. We once again, this was kind of a follow-up to our Hump Day Hangout we did with Chief Halton. Once again, we want to thank Fire Engineering and Firefighter Nation for making sure that all you knew we were doing this program. We greatly appreciate their support. We couldn't ask for better partners than Fire Engineering and Firefighter Nation. So I'll try to get something out here on social media when we're finally going to get Caesar and the group from Delaware to do the review of the fatal fire, the firefighter fatal fire line of duty they had in Wilmington, Delaware. Hopefully we're looking at January when I talked to Caesar last. So hopefully that'll be our next one, but we'll make sure to get it out on social media. So look, if you have any questions that we didn't get to tonight, please send us an email at info@traditionstraining.com. I'll get you to the right person that's on the Brady Bunch squares here and get them to answer it for you. And we appreciate your patronage for Traditions Training, Fire Engineering, and Firefighter Nation. And thank you to all the instructors that signed on tonight. I know it's a big commitment of time. I appreciate your time. So,
Hey, bro.
Good night, gents.
good night. Thanks, guys. Thank you to all the
Merry
attendees. We
Christmas,
appreciate
Happy
it.
Holidays.